So I'm delighted to have the one and only Neil deGrasse Tyson with me here today. Neil, it's a pleasure. You know, the world has gotten to know you for many, many years, since at least the mid-90s when you took over director at the Hayden. And you've been the participant or the creator of many great content on television. And you won that incredibly deserved Stephen Hawking Award for science communication. And so you've been, in my perspective, you've been very generous with your time and generous with your knowledge with the world. And I think that you're the preeminent person as an astrophysicist helping us all become excited about science.
And just so you know, you didn't have to either think or feel that to still get me on your show.
Yeah, but I do think that, you know, and by the way, I've said that to you before. Now, I have gotten to know you personally through many years of working on scores for the planetarium. And I have felt that generosity with you because you always want to, you know, take a moment to share a thought. And I've been so grateful for it. So I want to focus this conversation on our two worlds, as I was just saying. I think that through centuries, there's been this incredibly deep and compelling relationship between music and science. In particular, perhaps music and space science, astrophysics. And I know that somebody might think that I might get to talk about the obvious, the idea that the relationship between sound waves, light waves, you know, so on and so forth, technical things. But actually, I find it to be in the intangibles, the sense of inspiration, the sense of the search for meaning, of beauty, all of those other things. So that's spoken as a composer. I really feel those things. And I've been lucky enough to express a few of them through the years of being with you and everyone at the planetarium. But I'd love to know from your perspective as a scientist, if you see that intimate relationship, and if so, you know, how do you feel about those things?
Well, first, allow me to agree entirely with you that one can try to make connections of waves, and be they light or sound, and of course there are waves in the universe. But the people who go there, I think they're really stretching, not in a good way. I think they want there to be connections, and then they try hard to make connections. Then the connections they end up making end up looking quite forced. So I'll just give an example. It just so happens that we communicate using radio waves, all right? And that includes microwaves. In the old days, microwaves were just small radio waves. That's why they were called microwaves. But that whole part of the electromagnetic spectrum includes the full electromagnetic spectrum, includes not only radio waves, the subset of which is microwaves, but also infrared, visible light. That's the red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet, Roy G. Bibb of the rainbow, ultraviolet, X-rays, gamma rays. All of that is the electromagnetic spectrum. Just because of historical sort of utility, we use radio waves to communicate our voices. We invoke them to communicate with our voices historically. And so intimate was that connection that the very device that brought you your voice using radio waves itself was called a radio. Right? So we ended up thinking that radio waves had some inherent connection to sound. But they don't have any more of a connection to sound than visible light does, or X-rays or gamma rays. They just don't. And so the day we discover radio waves being emitted by Jupiter, this was it in the 1950s? Headlines said, sounds coming from Jupiter. It was like, no, they're radio waves. Right? Now, what you can do is, because we have a lot of hardware that enables this, you can take the radio wave signal, put it through our machines, our radios, and then you get what it sounds like, okay? But you could do that for any kind of wavelength of light. It's just that we had these ready-made machines that converted radio signals into sound signals, and our culture ends up thinking that there's something inherently connected between radio waves and sound waves, and there isn't. So connections that people try to make are always forced and unnatural. what you described in your question to me, in your inquiry with me, I think is exactly at its best. It's how you describe it. It is what role music can play, the arts in general, but you're a musician, so that's where I'm going to focus. That music specifically, in the ways it can serve our dreams and imaginations on the frontier of cosmic discovery.
Yeah.
And just think about, let's go back to 1968. We both may be old enough to remember 1968.
We're actually born 4 days apart, Neil.
Oh, excellent. Okay.
And both from the Bronx, by the way.
Bronx in the house. Yep.
Yes, yes.
So the 1968 was the release of 2001, A Space Odyssey. That is not a movie without a soundtrack. That is a nothing movie without its soundtrack. Pure and simple. We want to think, oh, he's got deep themes going on here. Yeah, okay, discover life and what's its meaning and all. I get that. But would anyone have watched it without the Strauss Waltz as the space shuttle matches rotation with the rotating space station before it docks? Would people have felt the movie in the way they did were it not for the soundtrack that accompanied it? So I'm the first in line to say that sound, intelligently, creatively, artistically composed sound, when juxtaposed with imagery of things that make you wonder, things that force you to gaze upon them with curiosity,
Yeah.
that is an ideal place to have an associated soundtrack.
Yeah.
Without which I think we are not feeding the full depth of emotions we're capable of as human beings. That's my
Yeah, no, that's incredibly eloquent. I don't know if you remember this. We did a little live discussion for Dark Universe, and I remember one of the questions you asked me was just obviously to engage the wider audience. One of the questions was, what does the universe sound like? To which I more or less replied to you the same thing, that it doesn't sound like anything. I kind of paused for a second in silence. And then they said, really what a composer is after is not what the universe sounds like, but what my reaction to the wonder of the universe is.
Let me ask a question back to you. So I've thought a lot about this with regard to films, but let me just come right in your face with it. So there's some films that I enjoyed immensely, but only when I return to them, fully knowing in advance the plot and the characters and who falls in love and who, once I knew all of that, I get to pay attention to other things. And there's some films that deeply moved me, and only the second time that I watched them did I even notice the music that went alongside it. And I realized, oh my gosh, this music was manipulating me without me knowing it the first time I saw this film. So let me ask you, is that a successful soundtrack? One where the music does not call attention to itself. It just helps the viewer, the listener, access the mood that the story requires.
Yeah, I would say yes. I think that early on, I learned that if you are particularly empathic, if you can empathize with a story, you can find your way subtly into the higher regions of the subconscious. Some people would want to get more poetic, Neil, and talk about it as a spiritual idea. But I'll leave it at this. It's just the finer places of the intangibles, again, emotion that can work without you necessarily consciously thinking about them that's a successful score. But with a little caveat that there are times when music does, in fact, take center stage and becomes less, subconscious. And there are places for that too, but mostly it's, as Jerry Goldsmith once said, the scores that you don't hear are the best scores.
So I'm delighted to hear that because let me not say I'm delighted. it it validates a feeling I had, and I didn't know if it was the feeling I should have had.
Yeah.
You fellow musicians, I didn't notice any of the music you played at all. I don't know if that's a compliment or an insult.
I mean,
but I've come to realize how important that is, because otherwise the music is front and center, and if that's the case, just go to a concert.
Yeah,
There's occasions where music is front and center.
Yeah,
if you're serving an idea, an image, a posture, an emotion, then it should be one of the things on the platter. It should be front and center.
Copeland described that quality as an oversoul against a piece of film, having scored a few films himself, very successfully, I thought. I do try for that. In things like the space show, I am being a little more front and center in many places. It's hard not to be, but I do strive for that quality. I guess, it's funny, it's compelling to think about this and music and science and the history of all of the scientists that have been deeply interested in music. Galileo's father was a composer. Galileo played the lute. Einstein played the violin. All of the, there's all of this commonality for the kind of maybe the interests and the way scientists and musicians and composers go about their life, or how curious, maybe they're curious about the same things and just go at it different ways. I guess you're saying that you don't really buy into any other technical connections, the way NASA recorded the sound of the planets, right? Were they looking for something that was harmonically instructive in any way?
Well, there aren't sounds of the planets.
Space
sound does not transmit through space.
So when they recorded those sounds, they were really recording the ionosphere, or
Okay, so you have electromagnetic impulses, okay, and you convert that to sound. Fine.
Yeah.
And this is my point that I made earlier. You're taking electromagnetic energy and turning it into sound, and you want to say there are sounds there. Just say it's electromagnetic energy that we've converted so that because we can't see radio waves.
Right.
If you could see radio waves, you wouldn't have to convert them to sound. So we are taking electromagnetic energy that we cannot see and converting it into a way that our senses can intersect. And sound is one of those senses. So I don't have a problem doing that, but don't say the planets are making sounds. I'm not buying it.
Right, because from those NASA recordings come a slew of people converting them to tones and translating them into little scores, and a host of us.
So I don't have a problem with that either, if you're inspired by the fact that when you convert electromagnetic energy to sound from these planets, that you feel cosmically connected. I don't want to stop an artist from being inspired by whatever inspires them, ever. Okay, but if you're going to now say, I have sounds from another planet, you don't. You have electromagnetic energy converted to sound. It's like taking visible light, putting it through a device that converts the variations in visible light into a sound, and say, I have sounds from it. No, it's visible light, and you didn't even think to do that because you can see the dimming and the brightening of the, in the phases of the moon. You could see this. So I, like I said, I think it's been oversold or as a musical tool. Yeah. And it goes back to when everyone thought, music was some perfect thing that the ancients worked with. It responded well to the applications of math. Of course, when you invoke God as creator of the universe, and God is perfect and math is perfect, so math must be a direct handiwork of God. And if God made the planets, we must be able to find music in the planets. Right. Look at that thread of motivation there. So you start looking, and so you end up cramming, shoehorning, recutting, cutting the puzzle pieces so that they fit in, so that you can step back and say, look what we found in the universe. No, you didn't. Yeah, it's funny. I think that as a composer, I will confess that just to spark imagination, I will make that loose connection, not a technical one, but that poetic connection, because I think of the cosmos as a symphonic idea. I think like I said, whatever creative muses you reach for, go for it.
Right.
Go for it, but just be honest about what you end up doing with it and what you end up calling your work.
Right. Yeah. Very well said. Neil, I wanted to, on just a related, but a slightly different and related topic. I wanted to just ask you, with a little time that we have here, with communication, with regard to all of the things, the efforts that you've put in between Cosmos, Star Talk, Nova, the planetarium itself, all of the communications, the efforts to use entertainment and media to help people to become excited about science. Do you feel that that's in this day and age when people are more glued to their phones and internet than almost anything else, I'm sorry to say, is this where most of the excitement now is coming from? Is this where, do you feel that this is important because people are not becoming as excited through books and other things that maybe you, when you were growing up, got inspired by? And it's really now on the job of the media, and that it's so important that this is a mission that has to continue in a very strong way.
Yeah, I think it's the duty of the educator to track the means, methods, tools, and tactics that people use to receive their information, their enlightenment. You can not only track it, if you're really creative, you can invent a new way that they can receive and absorb knowledge, information, wisdom, insight. So when I was growing up, I read a lot of books on this, but at any given time, many more people will watch a movie than will ever read a book on which that movie was based. So let's be honest with ourselves about people's access to the written word relative to the visual, auditory sources. So that's the first point. So when I grew up, by the way, there are books, but back when I grew up, there was also magazines that were highly photographically infused. Look magazine. What else would you call it? Look magazine, Life magazine, Collier's magazine. So you can buy those magazines. You might read the articles, but the images associated with them were potent. Life magazine bought the rights to track the Mercury 7 astronauts, right? And later on, right up through Apollo. So that was publicly consumed media at the time. And that has shifted over the years. No, people don't buy magazines to look at the pictures. They're surfing the internet. People don't communicate with each other by telephone or written postage. There's social media. So if I did not connect myself in ways that people are now communicating, I could not consider myself a communicator. I'd just be lamenting, we don't do like we used to, and then complain about it. And that's just old man on the front porch in a rocking chair saying, get off my lawn. So I have been an acute observer of what's going on with regard to media, how it works, how people use it, where the landmines are, the pitfalls, where the joys are. And it's a lot of work. It's much easier to not pay attention to any of that and hope everybody comes to me. But again, that's just me. If that's how I thought about it, that's akin to me facing the chalkboard and delivering my lecture while you all look at the back of my head, where I require that you meet me at the chalkboard to learn what I'm describing. Whereas if instead I face you and then I go to you, then I'm communicating. And if I want you to learn something, I should minimize the burden of you learning it. So you mentioned medium, more specifically, it's pop culture. That I invest time retaining fluency in. And then when I clad the pop culture with science, it flows smoothly into a cultural embrace.
With all of the shows, do you feel a sense of mission accomplished with young minds?
Oh, no, I never think of anything accomplished. It's always a work in progress. Nothing is ever accomplished. But I can have personal goals. It was nice to get a book on the New York Times bestseller list. That's a personal sort of achievement. And it has the added fact that to be on the bestseller list means many people are reading it and buying it and talking about it. Yes. But no, it's always a work in progress. I'm learning daily new ways to communicate with the public, with the help of people a third my age, by the way, who grow up in it thinking only that way, where I have to then learn it separately. So in Star Talk, I'm the oldest person working on Star Talk. Everybody else. There's someone a year younger, and most everyone else is half my age and younger than that.
Right.
These are producers, writers, people who are combing the landscape for what would make a good show,
right?
Who we should connect to it, how we would connect. So yeah.
And listen, I know you, but as a viewer, I absolutely love, not only Star Talk, but all of the things that you've done through the years, because you're unique in your ability to make all of this fun and compelling. And you also have an interesting way to infuse, to embed pop culture, people like myself into these ways of communicating very, very high-minded ideals in science. So when I say mission accomplished, all I'm trying to get, I don't think I meant to say your work is done as much as mission accomplished, raising the awareness, raising the bar for people being curious.
Sure, I'd like to think so. But given the rise of misinformation out there and the disconnect between what is true and what people think is true, every day I think I've just failed. So there's a lot more work to be done. And by the way, I'm happy to report many other people are on this landscape of sort of science popularizing, if we call it that. And so I can't and shouldn't ever be the only person engaged in this. And I'm happy to report that I'm not.
Well, I can tell you, as somebody who has a small part in helping efforts of yourself directly at the planetarium and, being a fan of all these things, I'm honored to have, gotten to know you a little bit and also to, participate in things that happen down at the Hayden.
I've always been delighted to engage artists in whatever way that they are inspired by the universe, as you clearly have been.
Oh, I can't say enough about it. It's a singular experience in my life. Just before we go, I just want to turn just to one fun thing, if we can, just for a second, with Mars. This is not about music anymore, but I've told you this before, but when I think of Mars, and I'm trying to watch the images that are brought back now with the mini helicopter, and just that stuff fascinates me. Just the incredible ability to see Mars the way we see it now. When I think of Mars, many years ago, you brought down, for myself and Whoopi, you brought down that meteor, and we were sitting talking, and you were talking about an asteroid that you and your community of scientists were looking to mitigate. And you went into detail about it. And I remember my friend Russ, also from the Bronx, had said, "Hey, Robert, tell Neil, you specifically, tell Neil, send that thing over to Mars. F them." And it was the funniest thing, so scientific. But anyway, the Mars issue, so far from what you've been able to see and from the information that's gathered, is there anything extraordinary that stuck out to you so far with the current images coming from the rover and the little helicopter that's now exploring?
For me, it's the engineers shining in the sunlight. It is a demonstration of what is capable. By the way, the Perseverance rover is clad with every square inch of its surface science experiments in biology, chemistry, biochemistry, geology, as well as some atmospherics. So it's the continuation of our attempt to learn the past, present, and future of Mars, not only its surface, but subsurface, and now its atmosphere. So right now, to me, nothing doesn't stand out as, oh my gosh, an amazing scientific discovery, because most science is incremental. The fact that we can have a helicopter on Mars greatly grows the access that our hardware has to Martian terrain, because the rover is not going to go down one of those cliff faces, but you can easily dunk the copter over the lip of a crater, have it look around, and then come back and report. So for me, this latest round of Mars missions is a triumph of what engineers have imagined in the service of scientific questions. And so I think we should just bask in the fact that we can plunk down an SUV-sized rover with a helicopter on another planet. That's an extraordinary feat, which I think many people even today take for granted.
No, I'm looking forward to seeing all of the future images and just following this. It's just incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Neil, as I've said before, you're so generous to give me your thoughts, to participate in this little series. I can't thank you enough.
Okay, no, it's always great to, and it's been great to collaborate with you. I mean, I'm not the principal collaborator. It's you're collaborating with the universe. Just want to make that clear.
Yeah. Well, that's a pretty big idea.
It is, but it's true, and so I'm happy to tell anyone who wonders what that actually is. So I'm happy to serve your interests and curiosity.
Thank you so much.
All right.